Rain poured over the Romano estate like a curtain of silver as Elena Rossi stood before the iron gates, clutching her thin coat tighter. She'd spent her last coins to get here, the mansion of Don Alessandro Romano, a name whispered in every dark corner of Naples. She had one goal: survive. The gates opened with a hiss, and a man in a black suit led her through marble halls lined with portraits of powerful, cold-eyed men. Every step echoed. Every corner felt watched. At the servants' quarters, the head maid handed her a uniform and rules written in careful cursive. Do not enter the study. Do not speak unless spoken to. And above all, never look him in the eyes. Elena nodded, though her curiosity burned. Hours later she polished silver in the dining hall when the air shifted, heavy, electric. The sound of boots clicking on marble drew her gaze upward before she could stop herself. He was there. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black. His dark hair framed a face too sharp to be kind. His eyes, cold steel and fire, landed on her and she froze. "You're new," he said, voice deep, controlled. "Why, sir," she stammered. A drop of wine slipped from the decanter in her trembling hand and splashed across his white shirt. Gasps filled the room. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. Instead he stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat of him. "Stay still," he whispered, his breath brushing her ear. Her heart thundered. He took the napkin from her hand, wiped the stain himself, and left the hall without another word. The other maids stared, wide-eyed. "You should pray tonight," one of them whispered. "He never forgives mistakes." But as Elena cleaned the last of the spilled wine, her fingers trembled not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. The mansion slept beneath a velvet sky, but Elena couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes she saw him, the way his gaze pinned her like a secret he intended to keep. She tried to convince herself it was only fear. But fear didn't make your pulse race when you heard a man's footsteps echo in your memory. By morning she had almost convinced herself it was nothing, until she was called to serve breakfast in the Don's private dining room. The same man. The same eyes. Only this time he wasn't surrounded by guests. He sat alone, scrolling through files, sleeves rolled up to reveal a wrist tattoo, a raven inked in black and red. Power clung to him like a second skin. Elena lowered her gaze, setting the tray down. "Your coffee, sir." But as she turned to leave, her trembling hand knocked over a crystal glass. The sound shattered through the silence. Water spilled across the documents in front of him. He stood, slowly. Elena froze, heart slamming against her ribs. She bent to pick up the pieces, but his voice stopped her mid-motion. "Don't move." 2 words. "Oh, dangerous." He crouched down in front of her, his hand brushing dangerously close as he picked up a shard of glass. "You'll cut yourself," he said, his tone softer now, almost human. Their eyes met, truly met, for the first time. His weren't just cold, they were lonely. "What's your name?" "Elena, sir." "Elena," he repeated, like testing the weight of it. "Don't break anything else." He stood, his lips barely hiding a smirk. "Unless it's the rules." When he left, she noticed the faintest curve of amusement at the corner of his mouth, the ghost of a smile meant only for her. That night, as thunder rolled across the city, Elena sat by her window, staring into the dark. Somewhere below, she saw him on the balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand, looking up, straight at her. And though neither spoke a word, they both knew something dangerous had already begun. Days passed, yet Elena could still feel Don Alessandro's voice in her veins, that low command, "Don't move." It haunted her more than it scared her. The mansion, however, had its own way of whispering secrets. Corridors stretched endlessly, lined with locked doors and portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow her. Servants spoke in hushed tones when she entered. The air itself seemed to hold its breath whenever the Don's name was mentioned. One afternoon, while cleaning the upper hall, Elena heard muffled voices behind a half-closed door. She paused. "She looks just like her," a man's voice said. "Keep your mouth shut," another snapped, Alessandro's unmistakable tone. Her breath hitched. "Like who?" When she tried to peek inside, the door creaked and Alessandro's shadow turned sharply toward her. She fled down the hallway before he could catch her, heart hammering against her ribs. That night, she found an old maid polishing silver in the kitchen. The woman, Rosa, had been there for decades, and had eyes that had seen too much. Who was he talking about? Elena asked quietly. Rosa hesitated. "There was another maid, years ago. Beautiful just like you. She died in this house. They said it was an accident, but..." She stopped, crossing herself. "Don't go near his study. Some doors shouldn't be opened." But curiosity was a flame Elena couldn't smother. Later that evening when the house fell into silence, she walked the corridor again, barefoot, guided by moonlight. She found the forbidden door, the Don's private study, and noticed it slightly ajar. Inside she saw photos on the wall. One stopped her cold. A smiling woman in a maid's uniform. Her face, eerily similar to her own. Before she could step closer, the lights flickered. A voice behind her froze her in place. "You don't listen very well, do you?" She turned. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I was just looking for secrets?" he interrupted, taking a slow step forward. "Careful, Dolcezza. Curiosity has consequences." His hand brushed her chin, not harshly but possessively. "Next time, knock before you enter my darkness." The mansion felt smaller now, as if every shadow was alive and watching Elena's every step. She could no longer tell where the walls ended and the secrets began. That evening she found herself drawn, almost irresistibly, toward the study. Her fingers itched to touch the polished wood, to see the documents hidden behind the locked doors. Curiosity warred with the warnings Rosa had given her. A sudden noise made her spin. Alessandro appeared from the shadows, tall and silent, like a predator in a suit. "You've been busy, Dolcezza." His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Elena's pulse raced. I was just cleaning, sir," she stammered. He stepped closer. The distance between them shrank until she could feel his warmth. "You know the rules," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And yet here you are." Her heart thudded painfully, every instinct screaming to flee, yet she stayed. Something about the way he looked at her, intense, almost hungry, rooted her to the spot. "Stay still." 2 words, low and commanding, and the world outside the study disappeared. His hand traced the curve of her jaw, lingering far too long. Fear, desire, and something darker intertwined in her chest. "You test me," he murmured, lips barely an inch from hers. "And I like to see what challenges me." Elena's breath caught. The line between punishment and pleasure blurred. His gaze held her in a spell she couldn't break. One wrong move and... His voice softened unexpectedly, almost tenderly. "You'll regret it." But before she could respond, a faint noise from the hallway drew his attention. He straightened instantly, reverting to the cold, calculating dawn the city feared. "Go. And remember, obedience is safety. Disobedience can be dangerous." Elena backed away, trembling. Her mind raced. That brief, intimate moment had left her trembling, not just from fear, but from a desire she didn't understand. As she left the study, the echo of his voice followed her. "Stay still, Elena. You're learning, slowly." And in that single phrase she realized she was already trapped, not by chains but by the man who had the power to destroy her, or consume her. Elena tried to focus on her chores, but Alessandro lingered in her thoughts like a shadow she couldn't shake. Every command, every glance, every whispered word from him replayed in her mind, a dangerous rhythm she didn't understand. One evening, a storm rolled over Naples, and the mansion seemed to shrink beneath the thunder. Elena was dusting the grand staircase when she heard raised voices echoing from the study. Curiosity burned too bright to resist. Peeking through the slightly ajar door, she saw Alessandro arguing with a man she didn't recognize. His usual calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by a raw, dangerous intensity. "She's here for a reason," the man spat. "She stays," Alessandro growled, voice low and lethal. "I decide who is safe. And she is under my protection, whether you like it or not." Elena stepped back, heart racing. Protection? But the fire in his eyes told her it wasn't just care, it was possession. Later, Alessandro found her alone in the library. His shadow loomed over her, yet there was a strange softness in the way he looked at her. "You've seen too much," he said, his tone almost apologetic. "This house, these walls, they hold things you weren't meant to know." Elena swallowed hard. Why protect me?" He hesitated, a crack in the armor he always wore. "Because," he admitted, voice barely a whisper, "you remind me of someone I lost long ago, someone I failed to protect." Her stomach twisted. The dangerous Don, feared by everyone in Naples, was a man haunted by regret, by guilt, by loss. Yet that same man had the power to destroy her with a single command. "You must understand, Elena, my world is not safe. But so long as you stay close, I will do everything to keep you alive." She looked into his eyes, steel tempered with pain, and felt something stir, a strange mix of fear, trust, and a pull she could no longer resist. Alessandro turned, leaving her alone, but the intensity lingered. She realized with a chill down her spine that danger was not only outside the mansion, it was in the man who had claimed her attention, her fear, and she suspected, her heart. And for the first time Elena wondered, was she ready to step fully into his dangerous world, or would it destroy her? The mansion was quiet, deceptively quiet, when the first gunshots shattered the night. Elena woke to screams and the metallic scent of blood. Panic surged through her, but fear was quickly replaced by adrenaline, and by the terrifying realization that Alessandro was in danger. She slipped through the halls, clutching a kitchen knife, heart hammering in her chest. Shadows moved like predators and masked intruders were everywhere, ransacking the mansion with brutal efficiency. From the staircase she saw him, Alessandro, unarmed, facing 3 men at once. His usual composed demeanor was gone, replaced by a feral intensity. Every movement was precise, lethal. "Get to safety," he shouted, his eyes briefly meeting hers. But she couldn't. She couldn't leave him, not now. A gunman lunged toward her and instinct took over. She swung the knife with everything she had, striking him in the arm. He went down with a scream and Elena froze, horrified by her own courage. Meanwhile, Alessandro fought like a storm, each punch and kick precise, devastating. Blood splattered the marble floors, his shirt torn. Elena ran to him, pressing a towel to his bleeding side. "Elena," he growled, voice rough, panic-laced with anger. "Get out. Now." "I'm not leaving you," she shouted, tears mingling with rain from the broken windows. He grabbed her, pulling her close, pressing her face to his chest. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice trembling with fear she had never heard before. "Don't move, stay with me." Gunfire echoed, but for a moment time slowed. She felt the full weight of him, not the Don, not the predator, but the man who would do anything to protect her. When the last intruder fled, leaving a trail of blood and chaos, Alessandro sank to his knees, holding her tightly. "You're reckless," he said, voice hoarse, fingers tracing her hair. "But you stayed. That's why I can't lose you." Elena's chest heaved, every nerve on fire. For the first time she realized that being close to Alessandro wasn't just dangerous, it was consuming. And she didn't want to run. The mansion was quiet now, but the aftermath of the attack left a tense, heavy air. Blood had been cleaned, but the memory of violence lingered like a shadow. Elena sat beside Alessandro on the couch in his private study, her hands trembling as she pressed a damp cloth to his wounds. "You shouldn't have stayed," he muttered, his usual authority softened by exhaustion. "And leave you?" Elena snapped, her voice shaking. "Never." He let out a low, almost imperceptible sigh, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them they were no longer just dangerous steel, they were raw, human, vulnerable. "Elena, you remind me of her," he whispered, voice low, almost a confession. Her heart skipped. "Who?" He hesitated, the usual confidence gone. "The maid who came before you, she died because of this life, because of me. I swore I'd never fail again. And now, I can't protect you from myself." Elena's hands froze. The truth hung heavy in the air. She had glimpsed the man behind the Don, the one haunted by guilt and loss, a man who could destroy the world around him yet still tremble at the thought of losing her. Without thinking, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his face. Alessandro's eyes softened, and he leaned into her touch, as if he had been starving for something tender in a world built on danger. You care for me," she whispered. I don't know how to feel anything but danger," he admitted. "But for you, Elena, I feel more." The space between them pulsed with unspoken tension. He leaned closer, their foreheads nearly touching. She could feel his breath, his heartbeat, the raw power barely restrained. "Promise me something," he murmured, voice trembling slightly. "Stay close. No matter what happens. Stay with me." Elena swallowed, every nerve alive. I promise," she whispered. For the first time, Alessandro allowed himself to relax, letting the protective mask slip. The danger outside hadn't disappeared and it never would. But in this fragile, fleeting moment, they were just two people, broken, haunted, and strangely alive, clinging to each other in a world that demanded they survive, or perish. The days that followed were heavy with an unspoken understanding. Their bond was dangerous, forbidden, yet impossible to ignore. Alessandro's eyes followed Elena wherever she went, a silent claim, and each glance sent shivers down her spine. Then the letters arrived, black envelopes sealed with crimson wax. The rival Mafia demanded Alessandro hand over Elena in exchange for peace. One wrong move and the entire Romano Empire could burn. Alessandro stood in the study reading the demand, jaw clenched. He tossed the letter onto the marble table, and his hand hovered over hers on the desk. They want to take you from me, he said, voice low, almost guttural. But I won't allow it. Not now. Not ever. Elena looked up at him, heart racing. But, what about the danger? Danger is my world, he whispered, brushing his thumb along her knuckles. You've already stepped into it, willingly or not. That night, he locked her in a private wing of the mansion. Not as punishment, as protection. She paced the room, torn between fear and desire, until he appeared silently, leaning against the doorframe. You belong to me now, he murmured, voice husky. And I will keep you safe, even if I have to tear the city apart to do it. Elena's pulse quickened. Every word he spoke carried both threat and promise, a dangerous mixture that left her trembling. She wanted him, even knowing the peril, even knowing that loving him was like holding fire in her hands. He closed the distance, hands brushing her waist, pulling her close. The air between them was thick with tension, their breaths mingling. I can't promise it will be gentle, he whispered against her lips. But I can promise. I'll protect you no matter the cost. She shivered, both from fear and desire, realizing the depth of the pull between them. Being Alessandro's was no longer a choice. It was survival, passion, and peril all wrapped into one. As he held her in the shadowed room, Elena understood the truth. Loving the Don came with a price. And she was already paying it, in heartbeats, in fear, and in every stolen, burning touch that left her wanting more. The rival Mafia had crossed the line. Elena, despite Alessandro's precautions, had been captured while attempting to flee the mansion. Panic and rage twisted in his chest like wildfire. Alessandro moved through the city like a shadow of death, every step precise, every hit calculated. Men who once feared him now trembled as he left a path of destruction in his wake. The streets burned with the echoes of gunfire, the night alive with chaos, but his only focus was Elena. Meanwhile, Elena struggled in the dark, damp cellar where she had been thrown. Fear clawed at her, but anger burned hotter. She knew Alessandro would come, that he would fight through hell itself for her. Still, she refused to be a helpless victim. The doors burst open and there he was, Alessandro Romano, danger incarnate. His eyes, fierce and unyielding, locked on hers. Stay still, he growled, voice low and lethal, the words trembling with emotion. Elena didn't move. Not out of fear, but trust. Trust in the man who had made the impossible seem real, that she could be safe in the arms of a predator. He swept through the captors with a terrifying grace, leaving them incapacitated or fleeing in terror. When the last one fell, he pulled Elena into his chest, pressing her face against him. I promised I'd protect you, he whispered, fingers tangled in her hair. Do you understand? You're mine, only mine. Tears slid down Elena's cheeks, not from fear but from relief, desire, and the overwhelming intensity of the man holding her. They didn't speak as they fled the burning building, city lights flickering in the distance. His presence consumed her, dangerous and irresistible. Once safe in the quiet of the mansion again, he held her close, whispering against her hair. Fire destroys everything it touches, but sometimes it forges what's meant to survive. Elena pressed herself against him, realizing that the storm around them was nothing compared to the fire that bound them. A dangerous love neither could resist, a passion that would leave scars and a bond forged in chaos and blood. The city had quieted, but the shadows lingered. Alessandro's enemies had been defeated, for now, yet the air remained thick with the promise of danger. Every corner, every alley, reminded them that peace was fleeting. Elena stood on the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair, and watched the night stretch over Naples. Alessandro appeared behind her, silent as always, his presence magnetic and commanding. You've survived my world, he murmured, fingers brushing her shoulder. And yet, you still choose to stay. Elena turned to him, heart racing. I don't want to leave. Not after everything. Not after you. He studied her, eyes dark with desire and something softer, something human beneath the Don's ruthless exterior. Slowly, he closed the distance between them, pressing his forehead to hers. This life, it will always be dangerous, he whispered. I can't promise safety. Only that my desire, my obsession with you, is real. And it will always be dangerous. She smiled, a trembling, defiant smile. Then I'll face it with you. Danger and all. Alessandro's lips brushed hers, a kiss that was both tender and claiming, a promise and a warning. Every heartbeat between them screamed with the intensity of what they had survived, Blood, fire, fear, and desire all woven into one. You've been mine from the start, he growled softly against her lips. And you'll be mine, forever. Elena leaned into him, understanding at last that the man behind the Mafia mask was not only dangerous, he was hers. Every command, every whispered word, every dangerous glance had led them here. The mansion around them, once a fortress of fear, now felt like a home, not safe, not peaceful, but theirs. Together they had survived the fire, the blood, the enemies, and the chaos. And together they would face whatever darkness came next. In Alessandro's arms, Elena realized something thrilling and terrifying at once. Love with him was never gentle, never simple, but it was real. And it was worth every risk, every heartbeat, every stolen, dangerous moment. The night held them close, two hearts forged in peril and passion, bound by a love as dangerous as the man who claimed her.